today we've got a special guest that we're going to have come in, and we're going to talk about the state of AI for entrepreneurs. How many people are entrepreneurs? I'd expect more hands than that, but thank you for coming today. We also have a very special guest, Ambassador Pop, so he's going to come up and give us a few words. So first I'd like to introduce Kevin Higgins. Kevin is the political economic counselor. He's going to go ahead and introduce the ambassador. Thank you.
Hey. Thank you very much. Morning. I think just to say very briefly, I think this is, first of all, thank you for coming, and good morning, and thanks for supporting the event. And I think we at the U.S. Embassy are so grateful to have Vivek with us, and I think this is going to be a real treat for you. He's received a tremendous response everywhere he's gone so far in Uganda, and we're very lucky that he chose to come to Kampala and not somewhere else. It's my pleasure to introduce Ambassador William Pop, a career member of the Senior Foreign Service, rank of Career Minister. He was confirmed by the U.S. Senate as ambassador to Uganda in July of 2023. He's approaching 3 years in office. Prior to Uganda, Ambassador Pop served as the ambassador to Guatemala from 2020 to 2023, and before that as the deputy chief of mission to the U.S. mission in Brazil, where he was also chargé d'affaires, or acting ambassador, from 2018 to 2020. Before that, he was the political counselor and the acting deputy chief of mission at our embassy in Nairobi. And he was also director of the Office of Regional Economic Policy and Summit Coordination in the Bureau of Western Hemispheres in the State Department for the 215 Summit of the Americas. Other overseas assignments for Ambassador Pop include Deputy Principal Officer in Sao Paulo and at our U.S. embassies in Colombia, Angola, and Nicaragua. Ambassador Pop is a graduate of Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri, and he has his master's from the George Washington University in Washington, D.C. He is the recipient of a Presidential Rank Award and numerous State Department awards, and he's a fluent speaker of Spanish and Portuguese. So please join me in welcoming Ambassador William Pop.
Good morning. What you can probably tell from my bio is I am not an expert in artificial intelligence and a lot of the topics that we're going to be talking with today. So I am particularly excited to be joining with you in this very important conversation, and very, very grateful. I want to start by thanking Ken Stober and the whole team at Simplifi, as well as all the colleagues who helped to make this event today possible. I also wanted to thank each and every one of you, both that are here present, as well as I know quite a few folks online as well that are dialing in, for what I think is going to be a truly valuable, important, and I think insightful conversation, not just about the future of technology in general, but the future of the digital economy, the business landscape, and the opportunities that are ahead of us here in Uganda, from the United States, and really around the world. And I particularly want to thank our distinguished guest, Dr. Vivek Mohindra. Vivek, thank you for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come to Uganda, traveling from the United States. We at the U.S. Embassy here in Uganda are very honored to be able to host your visit, to support your visit. For those of you who have had a chance to see Dr. Mohindra's bio, you know that he brings decades of experience in a whole range of different technologies, including AI, but also deep experience in business transformation and strategic innovation. Most recently with Dell Technologies, but also having worked with McKinsey & Company, as well as many other firms, worked in venture capital, etc. Just a really illustrious career, and we're grateful to have you come and share your insights with us. Again, I want to say thank you to Ken and to Simplifi, as well as the entire ICT Association of Uganda for co-hosting this event. It's these types of partnerships that are exactly what we need to drive innovation and growth here in Uganda. And of course, I want to thank each and every one of you present here in person, but also online. The, um, the entrepreneurs, the ICT professionals, folks from government, students, business leaders, the media. Just appreciate you all being present and dialed in. It shows the seriousness of Uganda's interest in a digital future, and the U.S. as a partner for now more than 60 years of Uganda is proud to be working and engaging with you in this journey. And it is a partnership between Uganda and the United States, which is focused on creating real economic opportunities centered on trade, investment, and innovation. And so it is really fitting that we're talking about artificial intelligence today, because AI is not some distant futuristic technology. It is here, it is now, and it is already transforming economies around the world, including here in Uganda, beginning to have incredible impact. And the United States has made American leadership in AI a national priority, and with a focus, particularly in accelerating innovation, building AI infrastructure, and leading and engaging international partnerships around the world. And it's why that focus on international partners is why we have brought Dr. Mohindra here today, because we want to be able to share American expertise in AI, best practices. This is a very quickly moving sector. There's a lot to learn. There's a lot that's changing fast, and we want to be able to share our experiences with, have engaged discussions with all of you on these topics so that we're building the best, most secure, and most innovative solutions possible. Of course, here in Uganda, the government has set an ambitious tenfold economic growth goal and has identified technology as a key enabler of this growth. And that's smart. That's definitely forward thinking. That's the kind of vision that can attract investment and partnerships, including from the United States. And today, that's why we're here, about building those connections with you, Ugandan entrepreneurs, with American companies that can provide that technology, that training, and that investment you need to scale. We also want to support a vibrant discussion about the right regulatory environments that encourage innovation, that support partnership with the United States, while also protecting consumers and ensuring fair competition. And we, as the United States government, are mobilizing financial tools around the world, from the International Development Finance Corporation, or DFC as we call it, to our Export-Import Bank and others to really help facilitate the financing and the support that's needed to make these partnerships a reality. But of course, none of this can happen. It's not just governments. It can't happen without all of you in this room. The entrepreneurs in particular, you're the ones who are going to play a fundamental role in building Uganda's AI future. You're the ones who are going to create the applications, you're going to start the companies, you're going to generate the jobs that are going to transform this digital economy. Of course, the ICT professionals also are going to implement the systems, they're going to train the next generation, and you're going to make sure that Uganda has the technical capacity for investment. The students that are present here, you're very welcome. You're the future. It's the what you bring to the table, and also what the decisions that are going to be made about AI strategy and technology partnerships that you are going to be seeing implemented and working through over the next years to come. So really, our challenge collectively, each and every one of us, regardless of which group we fall into, is, I believe, to think big and to be ambitious. We believe, as the United States, really in Uganda's potential. We believe in our shared entrepreneurial spirit. The United States has benefited throughout our history with a deep entrepreneurial spirit. We believe that we share that with Uganda, and we believe that working together, we can build a digital economic future that creates prosperity for both of our countries. So we're ready to get to work. We're looking forward to a great conversation this morning. And Ken, Vivek, the the floor is yours. And we look forward once again to having great questions and great input from everyone here present and online. So thank you, and look forward to a fantastic conversation.
Thank you, Ambassador Potts. Round of applause, please. Thank you. All right, I'm going to...
I should turn my microphone on. All right, my microphone is on now.
Okay. I'm going to let Dr. Vivek Mohindra introduce himself. I could not do the justice of some of his talents and some of the things. I've been able to spend the last couple of days with him. I'm very, very impressed with his background, some of the stuff that we're working on, but I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Yeah, sure. Ambassador Pop's already done, excuse me, a great job introducing myself, so I'm going to be brief because I know all of you have a lot of questions. So my name is Vivek Mohindra. I grew up in India. I am a chemical engineer by training. I then went to the United States, where I was fortunate that the United States gave me the opportunity to attend graduate school there. I went to MIT, I got my PhD in chemical engineering, and then I got an MBA. And then I moved to the, excuse me, the allergies always kick in. Now it's okay. Then I moved to the private sector. I started my career at McKinsey & Company, which is a large consulting firm, global consulting firm. I used to co-lead their semiconductor practice globally based out of the US and Korea. Then moved to Dell, where I worked at the pleasure of working for Michael Dell directly as the chief of staff. I learned a lot from him, ran a few businesses for Dell, became an investor in late stage buyout at TPG. Then I became a venture capitalist. We're a partner, and I invested $750 million across life sciences and technology companies. Came back to Dell 6 years ago to run a business and became the chief strategy officer just as AI was coming into full force. Transitioned to a special advisor role to our vice chairman, and then I retired from Dell almost 2 weeks ago at this point. And I knew it was coming, which is why I could commit to coming to Uganda and spend this time. And this is my first time in Uganda, and it has been terrific. And hopefully this is not my last time here, as I've been telling people. So with that, I know, Ken, you have a whole set of questions that you want to ask me. How do you want to do this? Should we sit down, or should we keep walking and do it that way? What would you like?
We can go ahead and sit down, but
Okay.
I have one more guest I want to introduce.
Okay.
One of our other sponsors, the ICT Association for Uganda. I have Grace that's here. I'd like her to come up and just say a few words about ICT. They're a wonderful association. If you're not a member, this is a great group to join to get all your ICT association and get all your ICT needs, and they do lobbying and they work with the different communities. So Grace can give you a little explanation about ICT Association. Thank you. You go ahead, Grace.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Good morning, Ambassador. You're most welcome to Uganda. It's really a great honor to be here in your presence and your team from the embassy. And Dr. Vivek, welcome to Uganda. As I told you, I knew someone who was called Vivek, and I thought he's the same person. But it's good to see you here, and Ken, thank you so much. My name is Grace Achire Labong, and I sit on the board of ICTAU. And my job here is quite simple, to just basically represent my chairperson, who is not here at the moment. She's in Rwanda. I'm Elizabeth Ntege. She's the chairperson. We are so excited to have this kind of conversation here today. ICTAU is really the major, I would say, the main umbrella body for ICT in Uganda. It brings together everybody who is in ICT, from businesses to students to advocacy. So our main role is basically to bring together all the community in the ICT space so that we can be able to influence the development of the sector. And I think the ambassador just introduced something, that ICT is an enabler. It's a very important, it's a priority sector. And according to our policy within the government, the 10X, ATMs, I know you've heard of ATMs. The ATMs, government has identified 4 main sectors. And the first one is agriculture. The second one is mineral. The third one is, the second one is tourism, and the third one is mineral, and the last one is services. But IT is one of those components of that services, and we believe that IT is a major component of enabling all these other three sectors to basically become more. So as ICTAU, we are there to bring together issues that needs for government to basically make the environment much more conducive for players to come in. Now, when it comes to AI, which was what excited us, the AI state of AI entrepreneurship in Uganda, I'm quite sure that everybody hears the conversation today. You cannot have a complete conversation without having the word AI flung into it. But do we really understand what this AI is and how can it be of value to us? And I'm hoping that Dr. Vivek, you would be able to help us to bring that to life. I know many of you are probably have been engaged with AI, but at a government level, at association level, the conversation is how do we then integrate and make this technology meaningful to us. So we are excited to see what is happening in the US, what is happening in the development countries, so that we can be able to learn to see how we can be able to apply AI in a much more controlled and in a much more organized manner. I know at a government level already there's a program going on where there's a committee that has been put together to put together policies and structures in which AI can be implemented within a national framework. At organizations level, for us at ICTAU, we would like to see companies and organizations basically coming out with governance systems and structures which allow AI to be used in a much more profitable and much more controlled manner as well. So what we are learning today, we hope to take it up, and if there are issues that needs to be policed, need some policy, we would be very happy to see how we can be able to bring it up. As ICTAU, one of our major responsibility is to influence policy at a government level so that we can have conducive policies that can make the ICT sector thrive. So I'm very excited to hear what you're saying, and I'm joined here with my colleague from the ICT Association, Patricia, if you can just stand up and they can see you. So we are here, she represents the secretariat, she's the one who manages the association. And for those of you who are not members, I would like to ask you, please, if you want us to become the sector that can have influence, we need the numbers, we need the people, we need the membership. And maybe before we end, Ken, I just want to announce that we have what we call the National ICT Summit every year. This is where it brings all the ICT, all arms of ICT. It doesn't matter whether it's in fintech or in health tech, we come together. And this year, our theme is going to be around the ATMs. So we're going to be having a series of events, a series of pre-conference leading to, it is going to be in September. And we'll let you know the date, and we hope that you'll be there, and we hope that the US Embassy will be part of this conversation, especially bringing in these issues. Maybe Dr. Vivek, we might invite you back to come back here again. So watch out for that. We will be sharing that information. The issue is how does technology begin to amplify the four sectors, the ATMs. How can we contribute to the 10X? So technology is an enabler, and we believe that we can be able to, if we work together, we can be able to get that 10 time. Ambassador, 10X is the 10 times. We are trying to get our economy to grow 10 times within the next, is it 10, 15 years? 20 years. We need to grow from 500 billion to, 550 billion to 500 billion, which is something that is quite a big stretch. So I'm so happy to be here, and I would like to thank you so much. And I hand over to you, and Vivek, you're most welcome. We look forward to hearing what you're saying to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Grace. Thank you so much. We will be a sponsor of the ICT Summit later this year, and they do some great work. So if you're not part of them, please do that. So today we're here to talk about the state of AI for entrepreneurs and for businesses, especially in Uganda. So one of the things that Vivek has been doing has been traveling around the area. He's been here for a little over a week. He's been traveling around and visiting many, many different entities. The Ministry of ICT, the Ministry of Health, UCC, AmCham, many different entities to kind of talk about policy. One of his expertise is policy. So my first question is Uganda on the right track? Are we doing the right things right now?
Well, thank you, Ken. First, thank you, and thank you, Ambassador and Grace, for the kind introduction and giving me the opportunity to speak with you and share some of my perspectives. Ken, this is a question I get asked pretty much everywhere I go. And I have been to Mexico City, India, the EU, Korea, just in the last 6 months or so. As I have had a chance to engage with various forums, various government agencies that you talked about and have private conversations, the short answer is yes. The reality is no country has really figured it out. I think the types of, a few things I was struck by. First, the nature of the questions that I got asked. The intent and the clarity of purpose that everybody was pursuing, and a desire to really come up with a national AI strategy, which really furthers all of these causes for Uganda. I think Uganda is absolutely on the right path. Some of the messages, just so you know, and then the audience knows that I have been talking about. First, the pace of change with this technology is accelerating. Second, the impact is real, both at a macroeconomic and microeconomic level, meaning at a company level. Third, there will be massive value shifts, but we are in early innings, and these value shifts will occur across companies, across countries, across sectors, and across regions. And fourth, it really behooves us to think about how do we individually, in our individual responsibility and our responsibility as institutional leaders, how do we change the cadence of our decision-making to be commensurate with that? And I think the ATMs that you described, I am actually convinced that AI can fundamentally play a huge role in driving all of those sectors and helping Uganda achieve a 10x vision over the time period you described. So absolutely. I know it's a long answer, but the short answer is yes.
Yeah, I mean, you know, like you said, is Uganda's got a big lift to get to that 10 times, and with the changes in AI and the potential economic of AI, there's a great possibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So what is the role of regulators in policy and in enforcement? So what is it, I mean, right now if we do AI, if we don't do anything, private sector will come in and steamroll over and they'll do whatever they want, which is not a good thing. So what do you feel is the role of policy setting, the regulators and enforcement?
Yeah, one of the other messages I have been enforcing is that given the nature of the technology itself, the pace at which it is moving and the transformative nature of it, and my view is it's a multi-decade type of a transformation. The role of, it's critical for public sector, private sector, and academia to play a collective role in this one. And why is that? Because academia typically is the one who can provide the best headlights into what type of technology changes are coming. The private sector is where the rubber hits the road, because ultimately private sector is the one which translates a lot of these technologies and its potential into reality at a company level and a country level. And the regulators have a huge responsibility in setting the right policies to clarify the environment for the unleashing of the full potential of AI to occur. And there are three categories of areas that I've been talking about in terms of the role of the government in policy setting. The first one is to invest. The investment really takes the form of infrastructure investments, which would be data centers and compute infrastructure, energy infrastructure, as well as making sure the infrastructure is as efficient as possible. The second is innovation, most notably in terms of how upskilling of the workforce occurs at schools, universities, those employed. And the third level is in terms of evolving how the regulatory framework works, because the regulations are moving at such a fast pace that you need to come up with the regulatory framework, which, as the ambassador mentioned, needs to be more on the innovation end of the spectrum rather than over-stifling innovation, which I believe is absolutely the right thing to do, but then also needs to be agile enough to comprehend the changes that are coming in, so you don't end up creating regulations which are relatively static, because by and large, the companies who are making these investment decisions are doing it over a longer term horizon. Yeah. So regulators have a huge role to play in this.
Yeah. So one of the things that I see in Uganda, and I don't know if this is worldwide, is a lot of times the policy setting is government and some of the academia. It seems like private sector is sometimes missing out. I don't know if you see that, but how do we get private sector more, coming from private sector, how do we get private sector more involved? They're the ones who are spending the money.
Well, I'll tell you, Ken, I think the discussions I have been having over the last 8 days, I have not taken any impression that the various regulatory bodies are not planning to invite the private sector to participate in this. In fact, when I addressed the National AI Task Force just in this building across the hall a couple of days ago, there were several members of private sector that I noticed. I know Ernest from Sunbird AI was in the room. So I at least am not walking away with the impression that the private sector is being shut out of this discussion. If anything, I think in my conversations, the points I made about the criticality of public-private academic partnership, by and large, it's been very well received. In fact, to simplify it, I think one of the points I've made is the country should pick the national priorities. There should be no more than 5. They should fit on a page. And then the country should write down, okay, what is the role of the public sector, private sector, and academia across all of these 5s, and some simple bullets. And I suspect that will end up being a very clarifying construct for what the overall national AI strategy could be.
Okay. So one of the things that we see with AI is evil. AI is, we all want to see it as good, but sometimes we see it as evil. Can the policies and can the enforcements absolutely fix that? I mean, there's evil pictures, there's fake stories and stuff like that. What are we going to do to keep that from happening?
Yeah, I think this is one of those interesting things about technology, no matter what it is. Technology in the hands of the right players can do a lot of good. The same technology makes its way into in the hands of the bad actors who end up perpetuating some sort of evil, if you will. Now, good or evil are very strong binary words. I think there's shades in between that we need to also think through. The reality is, I think there are known risks from this technology. I think some of which you alluded to in terms of deep fakes, and how do you contravene that? How does an individual's private data get used, for example, for decision making? Those are the areas where the government and policy can play a huge clarifying role in terms of what the guardrails are and what the boundaries are. So it provides the clarity to the private sector and lots of entrepreneurs in the room in terms of what they can and cannot do within those guardrails. But I do not think policy alone can prevent evil from happening, just because the nature of technology is such that it does end up permeating out in the hands of the bad actors, and the bad actors do find a way to use it for nefarious purposes, which is again where I think the public-private partnership is key, because policy setting, clarifying those constructs is important, but the private sector fundamentally ends up playing a big role in thwarting some of these more nefarious uses from this technology, or any technology, and AI is no different.
Okay, we're going to change topics here a little bit. Well, first, before we close on that one, now all of this being said, and you've met a lot of other countries, how does Uganda, do you think, fit in the worldwide stage on a scale of 1 to 10? Where do you think we are as far as policy and direction and everything?
I think just by the nature of the questions I got asked, I infer that the policy has not been set. and the AI strategy has not been published. Several other countries have published them and are marching them forward. Now that in of itself is not bad news because of two things. First, the scale of Uganda with 50 billion or 60 billion GDP, I think 50 million people. The scale is such that it is not too late, if you will. And second, perhaps more constructively, the technology has moved in the time period. So those countries who came up with constructs a couple of years ago, agentic technologies were barely a glimmer. Now they're a reality. So as you start thinking about how do you take advantage of those technologies, frankly, to unleash a lot of entrepreneurial potential in the country, in some ways it provides an opportunity to leapfrog, if you will, in some way. So scale of 0 to 10, I'm an optimist. I would say 6 trending towards a 9, but that's the way I'm always an optimist in these regards.
All right, so we've got some work to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Every country has work to do.
Yeah.
Let's not just say it's Uganda.
Okay. Hopefully we'll get some better guidelines over the next few months on some of the things that we can do to improve.
Absolutely.
Okay, we're going to go change into just kind of general AI type stuff. So we hear a lot of terms that are floating around and a lot of different systems that are using. You hear, Grok and Claude and OpenAI, ChatGPT, Anthropic. What is all of these things? Where are they used? Is there certain areas that, hey, we should be using this? What is your favorite tools to use in this space?
Yeah, I think the first part of your question is interesting because what I have found traveling all over the world, and Uganda is no different, is that there are different understanding of what AI really means. The reality is AI and artificial intelligence has been around for a long time. In fact, when I was doing my PhD, I guess I can date myself, it was in early 90s, I used neural networks, which is a form of AI, to make sense out of my data back then. Now the difference, of course, is now we have fundamentally new transformer technologies that came about in a paper written in 2017 and 18, which got translated into GPT, the GPT moment being November of 2022. Now, all of these, the ones you mentioned, which a lot of us as consumers know about, ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, Gemini being the big four. The reality is there is no one size fits all. Well, that's one of the points I make often. Each of those, and those are the consumer-facing ones, there's a whole plethora of them which are business-centric. They are suited for certain types of applications and business use cases and consumer use cases. So in my personal domain, I use all of them, and in the rank order of how I end up using them, I would say I use Claude the most, Gemini second, and ChatGPT third. Those are the three I end up using in my personal type of work I do, including research. In business settings, when I was at Dell, there were a whole set of other technologies that were being used. So for example, content generation and management was a big use case over there. That was not being powered by these technologies. Behind the scenes, there were these technologies, but in front of them, there were other applications that had been built on top of that. Software coding was another one. And obviously, I think Claude has done a phenomenal job with software coding, so that ended up being the baseline tool for that. Customer services was yet another one. For that, there was a whole different stack with much smaller models that were being used. So my big message is, there is nothing which is superior to everything else. It comes down to what specific use case do you want to adapt it to, and there is no one size fits all.
Now the Chinese are coming out with a lot of stuff in their market and some of the things. Are we nervous about the Chinese?
Well, this is one of those technologies which is transformative across the world, across all the countries. And so as you can imagine, with that kind of a backdrop, China also has a huge initiative and effort behind that. As I look from my seat, there's clearly, China has a lot of energy that it can play with, but when you look at the base compute available, US still has 25 times as much compute towards these types of technologies than China does. There are techniques that are available algorithmically, like distillation and others, which have a perception of certain models being equivalent to the others. Turns out not to be the case. I think Chinese models are not as performative as the leading edge US models I talked about because of a whole bunch of other reasons. But second, more importantly, I think when you think about, as I think about as entrepreneurs sitting in this room, if I were building a business, what would I build that upon? I would want to build that upon a particular stack which has values, business and other values which are consistent with my values and a country value. And in that regard, I think there's a lot of questions about some of these Chinese models and whether they have biases built into those models that we know reflect the values of that government, whether they have any other hidden backdoors or other things that somebody needs to be aware of and be wary of. So I think this is one of those technologies that, of course, each and every country will play to its strengths within its limitations and come up with solutions and offer them to the rest of the world. But if I were building a business today, I would definitely want to build it on something which is reflective of my values and is the best in the world, which is the US technology stack.
Yeah, one of the things we do at Simplifi, I know we have a lot of Zoom calls and Teams calls, and I know everybody wants to put their AI agents in there. But you have to ask that question is, who has that data now? So if you have this AI agent you get for free, they control the data. They have access to that data. They're using it to learn their systems. Are you nervous about that? If it's just a simple, easy call, it's fine. But if you're talking about very specific things, you have to be worried about it.
Yeah, and I think you're right. With agentic, it becomes even more important because just to set the terms so everybody understands, an agentic AI technology essentially can perceive the real world, has some decision-making built into it, largely on the back of some sort of a model, and has the ability to take an action. That's what an agentic AI is. And you can string a multiple of them together to come up with multi-agentic systems. If you're building a system like that, then some of these biases and some of these other hidden factors compound over these steps. And then second, I think your point, as AI is all about the data fundamentally. With the data being ingested and the data being generated, you always have to be careful about where it is going and to what objective, to what purpose is it going to get used, and is that consistent with what you desire to do? And that becomes a really important consideration.
Yeah. So if you're using some of these AI tools, just be careful where the data is. So we're going to change over to, we keep hearing a thing called the Big Seven. These are the big seven investors, the Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, Meta, NVIDIA, Tesla. They're the ones who are spending all the money right now. Who's leading and who do we watch out for?
That's a tough question, Ken, because literally you can wake up every morning, and I do wake up every morning. Actually, that's good. All of us should wake up every morning. But more importantly, I read what has transpired in the previous 24 hours, and what you see is some leapfrogging going on. So it is really hard to say who is ahead. Now, some subset of those that you mentioned are developing their own frontier models, so they're spending a lot of money on that. In fact, the top 5 in the US this year will spend in excess of $720 billion. And last year they spent $400 billion developing these technologies. What I look for, go back to no one size fits all is what I look for. And if I am building a business or if I'm using AI within a particular business use case, I always look for who has the best for that particular use case or that particular business I'm trying to build. And the answer is it's not one or the other. Like 8 days ago, Google released Gemma 4, which is a phenomenal model that can work on PCs and phones really, really well. Obviously, then right within plus minus 1 or 2 days, Anthropic released Mythos, which they have only released to a finite number of players globally, less than 50, which is an incredibly powerful in the software domain. So it really depends on which domain you're looking at.
Yeah, because I came from Microsoft. I worked for Microsoft for a number of years, and I've noticed their stock went from $550 to $350 in a couple of months. And if you look at the next layer down below it, it was the investors were getting scared that they're spending so much on AI, but they're seeing no money coming back. Who's making money on this right now?
Well, look, I think, excuse me, two separate things. Who's making money and where is the stock market valuation? Just this morning I woke up and I read about Allbirds. Allbirds was a sneaker company in the US. Their previous brand got bought out by one of the investors, I think for $29 million. Just yesterday they decided to rebrand themselves as Allbirds AI. Guess what happened to their share price? I think it went up by a factor of 20 or some ridiculous number like that, just on the name of the change. So the stock market and what the valuation of Microsoft and others, I think I'll leave it to the professionals who can opine on that, because I frankly don't understand a lot of that myself, as Allbirds' example would tell you. But who's making the money is an important point. When you look at these, a lot of these models, by and large, or the AI use cases, they fall in two camps. They fall in the camp of training and then fall in the camp of inferencing. Training is you take all this data, you create these frontier models, and the leading ones you mentioned are from Anthropic, which is Claude, OpenAI, obviously ChatGPT, there's Gemini. Those are the big ones, and I think Grok would be another one I would throw in as a distant fourth. It takes a lot of money to train these models. And then the inferencing is where most of the businesses realize value. It takes less money, less compute, and less data to derive the benefits from the inferencing side. So the way a lot of these large players are working is they are developing these models, and then, excuse me one second. Okay, they're developing these models and then figuring out how to monetize them. And the monetization of these large language models comes about from, one, they're using it for their own product development, improving it, which is essentially an expense. They are then providing these as APIs to customers so they can pay on a per month basis or per API use basis in some form. Or number three, they're embedding them within their own products. So for example, Google search would be an example of that. When you do a Google search, you see a Gemini summary on top of that. Those are the three different ways they're monetizing it right now. There is a real concern that these models take so much compute to train that at the other end, the way you monetize it by selling it to customers, there is a question about, okay, if there's sufficient economics there or not, particularly when these pricing keeps going down at 95 to 99% per year type of a clip. So there is a question about that. But when I zoom out, global GDP is $110 trillion. Projections for the impact from this at a GDP macro level is about 16 trillion. When you look at any given company, the median productivity improvement they have seen is between 27 and 32%. So there's real value that companies are deriving. Now, whether the pricing of these models and the way they're getting monetized is appropriate or not, I think all of that is still playing out because the competitive dynamic is extremely strong in this marketplace. All of which is really good news for entrepreneurs in this room and companies using these models, because it gives you a lot of choices at very attractive price points to build your businesses on.
Okay, thank you. When I go into conferences, when I talk to people and everybody says, I'm doing AI, I'm doing AI, I'm doing AI. And then when they explain or ask the question, what is it that you're doing in AI? A lot of it is if-then programming. If this happens, then happens. Now we also see the computing processing power has gone up substantially, so they're able to handle more data. So everybody seems to be saying, we're doing AI, but what are good examples of real true AI today, and what isn't AI, even though people say it's AI?
Yeah, there's lots and lots of examples out there. I'll just use the example from my last employer, Dell. We picked 4 use cases: software coding, content generation and management, customer service, handling customer services, sales tools, and then we added a 5th one, supply chain management along the way. There were clear demonstrable use cases of AI. Some of them were classic AI in terms of supply chain, more machine learning, but the rest of them were Gen AI use cases. Yes, actually yesterday I shared some healthcare examples as well. Excuse me, I think my allergies here are really kicking in.
Sorry.
That's one of the reasons actually I'm looking forward to getting back to the US, because I'm due for my allergy shot in the US, and I'm not used to the allergens here, although I love the pineapples and mangoes, but that's a different story. So there's lots of good stories. In fact, I had put together some healthcare and financial use cases. There are lots of them as well. But to your macro point about lots of people think they're doing AI, but it's not really AI, it's very true. And the reason for that is because of two things that are happening. For a lot of companies, the board of directors are saying, look, everybody else is doing some AI, so where are you, the company, doing some AI? Which then leads to the CEO going to the team and saying, we got to go do some AI because everybody else is doing AI. And the team runs and does something which is not necessarily AI, but at least they can represent it to be AI. I'll give you an example from Dell examples. One of the first things we did, we looked at what are the use cases that are already being implemented, and across the company, when we didn't have any policies, there were 800 of them. Most of them were just RPA, just automation, fundamental automation. They were not really AI, but people perceived them to be AI, and more importantly, thought that they would get extra brownie points for declaring them to be AI. So I go back to no one size fits all. Some of them are fine using classic machine learning. Some of them require Gen AI type of use cases. That's what we should use, but it does require education at all levels. So all of us understand what we mean by AI. All of us understand what we mean by Gen AI, what we mean by agentic AI. So then there's no confusion about what we're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. So we saw a report last year, it came out that they said 90%, over 90% of AI projects in businesses failed. 90% failed. What do we need to do to fix that?
So actually, that research report actually came out of my alma mater, MIT. That was not a well-done research report.
Okay.
Well, I guess we're recording it, so they'll find out. But in my humble opinion, it was not well done because they went and spoke to 50 companies and made that statistic. I think their statistic was 95% failure rate. But leaving the statistics aside for a second, it is true that some companies are realizing the value from AI and most are not. And so what is the difference between those two? Companies who are deriving the value from AI have done a few things well. First, they have determined how their AI strategy can support or will support their business strategy. Number two, they have prioritized the use cases to a handful, not a lot. Number three, they have made sure that the data is ready for those types of use cases. Number four, they have put a strong governance in place to look at the execution of those use cases, and that's how they've gone about it. It's the same mirror of how companies who have not realized the values have not captured the value. They have not thought about how it fits the overall business strategy. They have not spent the time to make sure they prioritize those use cases. They have not made sure that the data is in place for that, and they have not put a strong governance in place. So that's really the commonality between those who have realized value and those who have not realized value so far.
Okay, wonderful. So the next question I have is, you're going to be in a time machine. You're going to go 1 year from now, and then you're also going to go to 5 years from now. Where do you think where do you think AI is going to look like in 1 year and 5 years out?
Yeah, it's a really interesting and a difficult one to answer, but I'll give you at least my personal view. If you go back and look, let's start with some basics. Today's AI is the worst it's ever going to be. Okay? Today's AI is the worst it's ever going to be. When you time travel back a year ago and ask people, what will AI look like a year out from then? Most people did not have it on their radars that we would have something like Claude Mythos types of capabilities. Just to level set everybody on what Cloud Mythos is, it's their latest model that Claude released to a limited set of 48 companies globally. But this model is so powerful that in 10 or 20 minutes time, it was able to find security vulnerabilities that have existed at the operating system level in the Linux BFD kernel for decades. So it is so powerful that Cloud only, Anthropic only released it to a handful of companies, or 48 odd companies, so they could fix these vulnerabilities. Nobody predicted that a year ago. And one of the terms I like about this, and then I'll get to 1 and 5 year question, is AI is fundamentally, the frontier of AI is a jagged frontier. Andrei Karpathy first coined that term. Ethan Malik from Wharton talks about it a lot as well, which really means the capabilities are not moving uniformly. They are jagged. In some cases, they move really fast. In other cases, they do not. In some cases, they move really fast. In other cases, do not. I was just reading an article this morning to drive it home. At the same time that these models can solve 5 of the 6 International Math Olympiad questions and do what Anthropic Mythos can do, if you ask some of these models, same sophisticated model, a question that I need to get my car fixed, the drive is going to take me 50 minutes. Should I walk, which will take me 10 minutes, or should I drive, which will take me 50 minutes? Some of these same models will come back and say you should walk, even though the objective is to get the car fixed. So this is just an illustration of how jagged the frontier is. So in 1 year's time, I think we will have these multi-agentic technologies ironed out, so many of them will start getting into the production environment. In 5 years' time, I think a lot of these will start manifesting the physical domain in a much, much bigger way. ChatGPT moment was November 2022. We are April 2026. We're not even 5 years removed from that. So that's why I think 5 years, it'll be much further along.
Okay, okay. I'd like to stop for a moment here and take some questions from the audience. Does anybody have any questions? Do some of you guys have microphones? I don't know who had hands up first. I think right over here we had a hand up. Let's do a couple of questions. We'll come back and do more questions, so don't worry. So I think this gentleman back here. There we go. Oops, do we got a microphone over here, guys? There we go.
Oh, there we go.
Yes. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simplifi, Embassy, Uganda, ICT Association for bringing this conversation. My name is Alan. I'm a yearly RLC alumnus. I have a company called FOSMIC. I'm the founder and CEO, and I'm also a student of computer science. Now, Dr. Vivek, I have 2 questions. The first one, with the agentic AI that you've been talking about, there's increasingly a possibility that people can now run companies as individuals. What is the possibility of going into that direction for entrepreneurs in Uganda? Then my other question is now on the computer science degree I'm doing. I'm supposed to start my research in May. Now, the Anthropic, I think Anthropic announced, it was maybe last year, that AI will be able to carry out its own research. And that's a very great breakthrough because it kind of worries some of us who are still in academia. What areas is somebody supposed to look into when they're researching? Because large language models are almost able to do everything now. So you could throw some light on those. Thank you very much.
So I think the 2 questions were first around with agentic and multi-agentic coming in. What would the possibility that individual entrepreneurs will begin to see individuals do much more in entrepreneurship domain, and the second one was around research. Which are the areas, promising areas of research? Did I get those two right?
Yes, the first one is about sole entrepreneurs running
Yeah.
a company completely as one person.
Yeah.
Then the second part is the research.
Okay. Right now is the best time to be an entrepreneur that I have ever seen in my entire professional career, hands down. And the reason exactly what you talked about, because what's beginning to happen is with some of these tools and some of these agentic technologies coming in, I think that we will see, we are already beginning to see actually companies being founded with just one person and the rest of those tasks being handled by agentics or agents in the beginning until they mature to a point where they can bring some more people in. In fact, in the US, there is active discussion about when do we see the first unicorn, which only has one full-time employee, because a unicorn is something which in the private sector would be a $1 billion valued company. I think my personal prediction is going to happen pretty soon on that one. And here's the good news for entrepreneurs in the room. With the access to the right tools, if you can spot the right business problem to solve and use some of these tools to create those companies, you have the barrier to entry to being an entrepreneur is the lowest it has ever been in my life. So that is, we will see more and more of that. Research, I think there are still a lot of questions which are unknown in this field. Anthropic itself has published papers which have used neurosurgery type of techniques or human brain probing techniques on these models to try to figure out how these models work. Because in many cases, many people don't even know how they work. So there's still a whole set of questions that people don't know about. I think we're just scratching the surface in terms of research and what are the big questions.
Okay, we did one more question. I think we had a hand up. One of these two had a hand up. Don't worry, we'll have more time for questions.
Thank you. My name is Paul Mboya, part of the Innovation Hub here as an innovator, and I deal with the solution for micro and small enterprises. I wish to appreciate seeing the flag of the United States to be part of this innovation ecosystem. And I would wish to recommend that every time you move around, please also move around with Google. As the mother of Android, it is very important for them to be part of our ecosystem. Regarding AI, I would wish to ask a question. Wouldn't we see in the future AI being a component of operating systems rather than being a standalone technology? Because you see today people are moving towards edge computing where we have AI installed, and it is now not seen as a unique innovation. And again, as you mentioned, many people say that they are doing AI, but actually just using AI instead of innovating it. So aren't we going to reach a point where it will be a component of operating system and not a unique technology offering something very different? Thank you.
All right, I'm having a little bit hard with the rain coming down. So was your question about the edge AI part of it and then being able to use AI application on top rather than AI? Because the rain coming down is becoming harder for me to understand.
Yes, looking at AI being a component of operating systems, computer operating systems, rather than being a unique,
oh, I see.
Yes, a
Embedded-
standalone solution.
Embedded in the OS.
Yeah, I think that is a really interesting point. So the question is, right now AI is a separate technology stack that sits on top of the operating system layer in some form. But do we ever get to the point where a lot of this AI gets subsumed in the operating system layer and becomes inherent? I think both will happen. I don't think, because when you think about it, the way the operating system works, or even below the operating system, the basic input-output system, the BIOS, which works at the hardware layer. So right now the technology stack is, you have semiconductor in the system, which really operates on firmware and BIOS. Then you have the operating system that sits on top. And then you have the applications that sit above it. AI will permeate all of these layers, but it will not become the sole purview of any given layer. because they all move at different speeds. Because the firmware in the BIOS, which makes the hardware work, will work on a different speed because of the release cadence of these semiconductors. The operating system, which handles many more things, will operate at a different speed. My view is that the application layer, which is where most of the innovation will occur at the fastest layer, fastest pace, will continue to be the place where we will see the most innovation going forward.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna come back here a second, and we're gonna talk about Uganda specifically. Uganda has a very young population, as you know, and we have a very large entrepreneur environment. There's a lot of entrepreneurs here. Every time I turn around, I'm an entrepreneur, which is great. It's a wonderful environment, and I think, as you just said, it's a great time to be an entrepreneur. Just looking at this building here, this is an innovation hub. There's a whole bunch of offices here for innovators. What advice do we need to give developers as it relates to AI, and how can they make money?
I'll repeat what I said. Now's the best time to be an entrepreneur. And one of the other points I've been making, and I see a lot of faces over here, as companies have gone about and implemented this technology, one thing that has emerged is that it's much easier for somebody early in their career and early in their tenure to adopt these tools than it is for those who are later in their tenure to their fullest potential, mainly because people who have been in the workforce a long period of time are used to doing things a certain way. They're set in their ways. While the way to extract the most from this technology is fundamentally to kind of release what you know and imagine and reimagine what the possibilities could be with a lot of these types of workflows. So what does that mean? The way to make money, I think, and it's a great time to be an entrepreneur, the way to make money is to first identify a business need or a business problem, and then use these tools to imagine and reimagine what the solution for that problem could be. And the good news is you don't need to go to a college anymore to become a software developer or software engineer. You can use a lot of these tools that we talked about to create application and other solutions. So identify a problem, create a solution using some of these tools, and ideally, my personal view is some of these vertical solutions, meaning a sharp solution which solves the problem end to end, all the way from data to delivery and being able to realize the value. Those are the best position if I were an entrepreneur to go after those types of solutions. One area which I know is a universal problem is how do you cleanse the data and get it ready for being ingested into these AI systems? That's another area that I would focus on. But no, find a problem, and then create a solution using these tools, and ideally create an end-to-end solution. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I think a lot of times entrepreneurs are, let's go create a solution and then find a problem for it.
Yeah, that has been constant. I think, and when I was a venture capitalist, I used to see a lot of young entrepreneurs coming to me, and yes, there were those in their labs and PhD research. They would come up with something which was really cool, and they would come to me and say, look, it's a really cool thing, you should fund me, but you got to start backwards from the problem. And hopefully the problem is large that you can build a business out of.
Yeah. So one of the areas that I see right now is a lot of companies in Uganda, and probably around the world, they don't even know, some of their staff don't even know how to use some of the AI tools. And I've been a pretty big vocal person about, can we start teaching, just even at the basic levels, can we start teaching banks, can we start teaching companies on how to use some of the tools for more productivity? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the AI skilling is a really, really big unlock for lots of companies and countries, particularly for a place like Uganda. And that skilling needs to occur at all three levels. Schooling, university, as well as those who are in the currently employed. So employers have a big role to play. Now, some of the challenge for schooling, unleashing the tools at that level, which I'm a big proponent of, is how do you make sure that these tools do not fundamentally impair the critical thinking capabilities that they had developed through the schooling program. That is something where I think the educators need to play a role as well. But absolutely, I think we have to make sure that everybody knows how to use these tools and extract the most from it. The best way for companies to extract the value is to take somebody who understands the technical capabilities of these tools and mirror them or have a team with those who have the functional or the domain-specific expertise and combine both of those. That's really the best way to extract the value from these.
No, I think there's a great opportunity to just educate the current small, medium businesses right now in some of the things they need to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's take a couple more questions. I had one question here, this woman here, she had her hand up before. And the microphone.
Thank you. I'm called Zila Arachimere. I work at Easy Agric. At Easy Agric, we are building, I think, the most powerful AI infrastructure for agriculture. So, Dr. Vivek, thank you for coming to Uganda. I have a few questions. So, from your research and experience, on a scale of 1 to 10, how far is Africa in the AI race? My second question is, when I was listening to most of the use cases for AI, most of them were around, okay, financing, supply chain, okay, and productivity, of which we, at our company, we actually do. In terms of coding, we reduced the number of engineers from 15, now we have 4. Because you can literally give cloud, and in a few minutes, you get the product you're looking for. But coming down to Africa specifically, and looking at some of the key challenges that most people are investing money in, let me say the development world. Let me say, for example, poverty, hunger. Which LLMs are currently leading on that front? For example, we have tried out a lot for disease diagnosis. We have tried out a couple of them, yeah? For, let me say, satellite monitoring, just even to get the data and then analyze it to give most accurate weather patterns for the farmers. But every time we do our research, we realize that most of the LLMs are actually, maybe because of the data, they solve challenges outside Africa very, very efficiently. Now, when you give it specific challenges within the African setting, disease diagnosis, weather monitoring, then that's where you find that there's a loophole. Either the diagnosis is not very accurate. So I want to ask, from your experience, which LLMs are available and are very accurate? And then which companies, from your experience, are leading on that front in solving some of the challenges in our vertical, let me say agriculture? Thank you.
On a scale of 0 to 10, the state of AI or the risk? On the first question, could you repeat that again?
First question, on a scale of 1 to 10, how far is Africa in the AI race?
Okay. Yeah, AI race. I often like to talk about the AI race as not a 100-meter dash, meaning there's no finish line. It's not like you start now and then you get to the finish line. It is a relay with multiple legs to it that nobody knows. So this is not a finite race, this is an infinite race. But looking at just the first stage of it, I think the infrastructure investment has led a lot of the progress that has been made so far. And that's where the US and the EU and China and parts of Asia have made more of those investments so far and are further along. But at the same time that has occurred, these smaller language models are becoming much more performant, and these agentic technologies are now coming into play. So while the first leg of this race, it may appear that Africa generally may be behind, it does not mean that it needs to remain that way, particularly if the policies are put in place. So that's why I don't like to call it 0 to 10, because it's not a finite race, it's an infinite race in many ways. On the second question of LLMs, which are the LLMs and all these tools which are best suited for Africa, this is a common pattern in a lot of cases, where these large language models have fundamentally been developed on data sets which are more English centric in many ways. So my personal view is that these large language models need to be adapted to the local context, whether it's through techniques like our RAG is one technique, retrieval augmented generation. There are other techniques like LoRa, low rank adaptation. No, A stands for something else, but LoRa is another technique. But there are techniques which fundamentally take these models and adapt them to the local context, not only in terms of culture and languages, but also the additional data sets you mentioned. Weather is a good example. My son is actually majoring in atmospheric sciences and meteorology, and he and I have talked about some of this topic as well. The availability of data is relatively sparse in some parts of the world, and that's why you see a lot of these models which are more anchored to Western-centric models or European-centric models. But there is data available in Africa as well, but it requires some of these to be fine-tuned. So that's really where the action and the actionability for Africa and countries in Africa lies, that you've got to take these models and fine-tune them to the local context. And any of these large language models can be fine-tuned, frankly. And I think that would be my advice.
Yeah, we're actually doing a study right now with Carleton University out of Canada, and we've got weather stations placed all over one of the national parks. And we're collecting as a 5-year data to collecting data. And I'm sure we should talk and see how we can exchange data on that. That'd be great. Patricia, you had a question, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vivek, for the insightful conversations, and for Ken for steering the conversation. My question is on the double-edgedness of technology. Its ability to level the playing field, but also, if not handled well, to widen the gaps, especially when you look at the groups like women, the youth, and PWDs. So how can we as Uganda, the government and all other players, ensure that as we embrace AI, we are not widening the gap, that no one is left behind? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a really good question, Patricia. Because, I get asked this question too. There's a fear that these technologies might widen the gap, and particularly if there's no accessibility to these technologies, could exacerbate it. My personal view is that these technologies will actually could be huge enablers for reducing the gap and income inequality gap as well globally. And why do I believe that? Because let's take software development as an example, software engineering and development as an example. Previously, to develop a good application, let's say, which required software skills, you had to go to a 4-year college, you perhaps had to go to a 2-year master's, and then and only then you could create something like an application or a software application which solves a particular problem. Now these tools are so capable that you don't necessarily need to go to 4 years of college or 2 years of master's to be able to, and if you can envision or spot a problem and envision a business opportunity, you can use these tools to create something and sell something, including the point of being solo entrepreneurs that we were talking about. So if the government have the right policy in place to provide access to these tools and this infrastructure to MSMEs, have AI skilling programs for those who are currently unemployed, I think this is a golden opportunity to use these tools for the betterment of reducing the income inequality gaps, and of course through that also make sure that, for example, women and other demographics who did not have access to this, they are not left behind in this. But it does require a very proactive and thoughtful approach by the government. And in my discussions with the Ugandan government authorities these last 8 days, I have made some of those similar points, and I'm encouraged that they're keenly aware of this as well.
Okay. This is a good transition into education. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on education. I look at some of these jobs, these job demands in the United States for salaries for AI experts, and it's just, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's just crazy, crazy numbers that they're getting, and it's a supply demand. So if I have a good, if I'm looking for people and there's not a lot of people, the salaries are going to go up. So as a young population here, what is it that the students should be learning now? I mean, there's different layers, obviously, the STEM classes and everything, but what areas should they be looking at for studying? What areas should they do researching in? And what areas should they look in to become an AI person in Uganda or even the rest of the world?
Yeah, I get asked this question a lot as well, including, my son was, he and I were talking about what to major in, although he's been aspiring atmospheric scientist, meteorologist since he was 6 years old, so that's what he's studying. Here are some interesting stats. So I went to drop one of my twin daughters for college now at this point 8 years ago, or maybe 7 years ago. When I was dropping her off, this is pre-AI, the career counselor said that an average person starting college today, meaning at that time, 7 years ago, will have 7 to 8 careers in their lifetime, which really got to the heart of what the role of a university is. The role of a university is to teach people how to think critically and to learn new skills along their career and life journeys. And that's why pre-AI, there were 7 to 8 different careers on an average that a college student starting at that time had. AI is no different. It just so happens that the pace at which AI technology and tools are moving is very, very rapid and covering a lot of spheres. But what I always encourage people to do when they go into college today is focus less on the major, if you will, what you're majoring in and what you're studying, but instead make sure that you focus on learning how to think critically and learning how to learn continually, because that will be required even more so in the AI era. And number two, wherever possible, cross-train yourself. So as I look at my career over the last 3 decades, I happen to luckily do both a PhD in engineering and MBA, so I kind of cross-trained myself, which has turned out to be hugely valuable as I have navigated my career. So as people who are starting now, I would say cross-train yourself, don't pigeonhole yourself into one particular major and go really, really deep, because a lot of the power from AI will come at the collision of these boundaries of different disciplines. And my niece, she is a computer scientist from CMU. She went to Stanford, got her master's in AI as well, but then she's also a poet. And the creative side of her brain and what she can bring to bear to these types of tools and technologies is hugely important as well. So my strong advice is cross-train yourself. In many ways, liberal arts education becomes more important because it helps you spot these problems that you could not spot before, because these engineering-centric tools are becoming so powerful, you don't need to learn how to build those yourself. So cross-train yourself and learn how to learn, because that skill will become even more important going forward.
What leads into a great question, a great conversation we had the other night was, should students be allowed to use AI in their education?
Yes, is my short answer. Now, what makes it hard is the following. As a student, I didn't really want to work very hard. And if I had shortcuts available, I would have used those shortcuts and used that time for partying. I didn't do enough partying when I was in college. But if I had done that, then I would have critically impacted my ability to think critically, adversely impacted that capability. So, but the answer is not to prevent the access of these tools for students, because as employers, we're looking for students who know how to use these tools, just like students know how to use spreadsheets and Word documents and creating PowerPoint slides. This falls in the same camp. What it does require is for educators to set the right boundaries, for students to have a little bit more self-discipline, which I know is easier said than done, because if I were a student, I am not sure I would have that either. I know you are just starting your college education, so be mindful of that there. But The answer is not that do not provide these tools. We have to provide these tools. India, I was there in February. India is providing these tools and making it mandatory. I don't know to what level, starting 4th grade onwards. That early in age, we've got to teach the people how to use these tools.
So we got to start looking at how do we implement them into the schools from young all the way up, and not necessarily be afraid, but make sure we still learn, right?
Yeah.
We can't just be dependent on the tools. So we get everybody keeps saying AI is going to take over all these jobs, and everybody's going to be out of a job. What job should youths and people be looking at? What job should they probably stay away from?
Yeah, jobs is a really interesting one. I'm a student of history, so I'll cite some macro numbers from history perspective, and I'll zoom in on AI and jobs to look at. When you look at historical jobs, as of last year, 60% of the jobs and roles that existed as of last year did not exist in 1940. 85% of the new roles globally since 1960 were created on the back of technology innovation. What does that mean? My strong view is each and every job will get impacted with AI, no doubt in my mind. Some will disappear. Entirely new class of jobs will get created, and most jobs will be augmented with AI. That's just my belief. I'll cite some examples. During one of the examples I cite often is spreadsheets. When spreadsheets came along, people whose job was to add numbers in companies there were called calculators. They disappeared. Their entire job category disappeared, but the entirely new profession of financial planning came into existence because you could now use these spreadsheets for what-if analysis around financial planning. So financial planners are a big job category right now. Same thing will happen. The more important thing is that we will see entrepreneurship increase very significantly and very dramatically, because the accessibility of these tools for those people who can see these problems, they will be empowered to start companies. So from a Ugandan perspective, I think when I look at the demographics with median age at 17, 67% of the population being over 15 years or under 15 years of age, and 78% under 30, if we get them the right tools, we will actually see a lot of new job creation, and people who are currently unemployed will find them both in the position of creating new companies as entrepreneurs, but also being in a position of being able to hire others. We'll begin to see a lot of that. But again, it requires access to infrastructure that the government needs to provide.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about cost. I mean, this is one of the things that's been very concerning. You know, we recently asked, one of our customers asked for a price of an AI PC with some NVIDIA GPUs in it, and it was in the $60,000 range. Well, that's not affordable. I mean, that's not affordable in a lot of places, especially here. What can we do to help that? You know, sharing GPUs. I mean, we're hearing trends going in that way. You mentioned the other day about potentially using older generation GPUs and things like that. How do we do that so that we can use some of these development platforms to be able to help the entrepreneurs?
The reality is, back to my no one-size-fits-all comment, the reality is I believe that there will be a whole spectrum of infrastructure and compute that will get used for solving these problems, all the way from these leading edge, latest generation GPUs, which are really, really expensive, to some trailing edge GPUs, all the way down to PCs and workstations. As Ken, you and I were talking about these numbers that you cited, they're for workstation class of products. But one of the trends that continues at a pretty fast pace is that these smaller and smaller models are becoming much, much more performant. And these smaller models are capable of being executed on much lower cost compute infrastructure, including down to the PCs. You know, lots of these PCs today, I think last year's statistic was 27% of the PCs sold globally had some sort of an NPU, a neural processing unit on it, which had capabilities to execute some AI workloads. That number is expected to go to 100% over the next couple of years, meaning in a couple of years' time, if you buy a regular PC, it will have some NPU capabilities on it, capable of executing some of these AI models, even at the same time as these AI models become more and more performant at a smaller footprint. So the combination of that will mean that a lot of this compute and AI ability to do these AI workloads will become much more accessible at much lower price points even than the ones you cite. So one of my advices to companies and governments is look at the entire spectrum. In the technology space, we call it a hybrid deployment. Cloud, on-premise with some servers, co-location facilities, all the way down to workstation and PCs and phones. Look at the entire spectrum as you're thinking of these solutions, and you'll find the affordability for the use case that you're looking at within that spectrum at the right point.
Yeah, we're hearing some of the cloud providers here, Rock Telecom, for example, they're starting to bring in GPUs for rental or for use. So I think we're starting to see it starting to come in here. I just recently bought a computer and I have an NPU in my computer.
There you go.
And now I got to figure out how to use it and take more advantage
That's
of it.
Exactly
That's
right.
the challenge, right?
That's an unused NPU sitting right there. You can rent out to somebody else.
Oh, there you go. Okay,
There you
if
go.
anybody needs some NPU space,
Yeah,
I'm
got it,
available
yes.
after this meeting. Okay. The other thing that AI has done is we've seen the increase of everything in ICT. Memory costs, CPU costs are some of the most obvious. I think everybody's seen scarcity, costs, everything like that. But recently, so we deal in fiber optics, we just got notified by our fiber optics provider that our costs are going up 200%. 200% for fiber optic. This is the core building blocks that we need to roll out ICT. This is concerning for me. So if I had a product I was selling, you know, for a couple $100, I'm now selling it over $1,000. And that's not good for our infrastructure and building out our infrastructure. Is this a short-term thing? Is this a long-term thing? It seems like there's hoarding going on. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, there's not hoarding going on. The root cause of this, lots of shortage right now globally. You mentioned fiber optics. I know there's a big memory shortage, and now GPUs and CPUs are also becoming short. The root cause for that really is that there is a global shortage of compute flops or computational power available, because these large frontier models are using so much, they use so much compute. And as we have moved across the spectrum of multimodality, meaning gone from text to text plus audio to text plus audio plus video, and now with these agentic workloads, at each of these breakpoints, the computational requirement needed goes up by a couple of orders of magnitude. So that's really what's going on. There's no hoarding, but the demand is insatiable. That combined with the global component manufacturers had not put sufficient capacity in because the demand was not exploding this dramatically. That's really the root cause of it. One of the numbers I often cite is when I was at Dell in 2023, I projected what the capital expenditures related to AI in the US would be in 2025, and the best estimates were $200 billion. What actually transpired in 2025, the number was $400 billion. This year, the top 5 in the US are spending $720 billion. So when the supply has not kept up with that, the duration. My personal view is that this is going to persist for at least another 2 or 3 years. I was just reading an article a couple of days ago. The entire output of from Korea of memory, and SK Hynix and Samsung are the big manufacturers of memory globally, and they're based out of Korea. It's been spoken off for the next 2.5 to 3 years. It's already allocated. So we will see this persist for quite some time, which then again goes back to my point I made earlier about the hybrid deployment. You have to think about using the entirety of that down to the NPU sitting on your PC to execute these workloads. Otherwise, we'll be waiting forever for some of these latest and greatest GPUs and CPUs to come available. So that's what I would be looking at.
Yeah. So expect our costs worldwide are going to be going up. Our cost for everything that we're playing in here is going to go up. So I have one more question, and we're going to get some questions now to the audience here. I have one more question. So we were both around during the internet bubble.
Yes.
Yeah, that's aging both of us, and I'm sorry. This looks a lot like a bubble to me, that there's going to be a lot of people, and then at some point things are going to fall out. Do you see it as a bubble? And then who are the key players that we think are going to pop out of this bubble?
Bubble is an interesting term. So again, I'm a student of history. Let's time travel back. Between 1996 and the year 2000, the amount of capital that was spent enabling the internet infrastructure in terms of fiber, photonics, and everything else was $440 billion. $440 billion. Now, was that a bubble? Depends on how you look at it. It was a bubble in regard to the valuation for those stocks that you were referring to earlier, some of those stocks or some other company stocks, but fundamentally in the stock market, where the valuation ran ahead of the fundamentals and ultimately cratered. At that time, a big reason for that capex was a belief that the internet bandwidth demand was going up, was doubling every 6 months, was a number that people had. But then there was some projection every 4 months. Because there was a perception that the demand is doubling and tripling or doubling at that pace, a lot of people ended up putting the infrastructure in place. What happened was the businesses which fundamentally drove economic value were not getting created at the same pace. So that $440 billion that was invested reflected in the stock price of a lot of those companies. A lot of companies lost out all their stock price. But what transpired afterwards? What transpired afterwards was a creation of a whole new set of companies, many of which you mentioned earlier in our conversation, that created fundamentally internet-based business models and created a lot of economic value. So that was then. Now there's a lot of compute going into the ground. There are businesses you can actually see getting created at the other end. There's fundamental transformation, productivity gains at company level that I described, the 27 to 32% median productivity improvement that we have seen so far, documented by academics and companies who have revealed that. You have seen recurring revenues from Anthropic and OpenAI being released, and you can see the dramatic pace at which they're growing. The shortest, I think, unicorns, which is reflective of how fast these unicorns are getting created. Some of these unicorns are getting created in 6 to 8 months, not because, and with fundamental revenues behind that. So in that regard, I don't think it is a bubble. I do not see anything in my horizon today that would suggest that the compute power needed is going to go down. And ultimately, most of this capex is going towards enabling that compute power going forward. Does that mean that all of these stock market valuations for a lot of these companies will remain at these elevated levels? Remains to be seen, because that is a factor of the competitive dynamic between these players. My personal view is the world doesn't need as many frontier models that are out there today, but competitive dynamics and some elements of game theory and prisoner's dilemma means that we will continue to see lots of investment go into the computational space.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I'd like to open it up to some questions. We had one question over here. I had to go first. All right, there we go.
Just in time, too, because the rain stopped and now we can actually hear the question.
Can we get a mic up? Guys, can we get a mic?
Hey, hello, Ken. Hello, Dr. Vivek. I am Steven. I'm a software developer. I got my bachelor's at Brigham Young University, and I've worked with different companies so far, but I like the idea that you addressed there's a rapid rise of AI, and we face a threat of employment, like possibly replacing most AI developers, software developers. But I recently developed an interest in AI agent, so AI agent engineering. And so my question is, how can I leverage AI agents to best help the businesses, assist businesses, like make decisions, because there's a big data that we have to work with, and how can I leverage my AI agent to best assist businesses here, and also, yeah, have efficiency in what they do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the background you have and the recognition of agentic AI and its applicability, I think there are two paths over here. It's clear to me as I've traveled around that companies here in Uganda, just like companies everywhere globally, do need help implementing these AI use cases, whether they're straightforward Gen AI use cases or agentic use cases. And that requires them to cleanse the data, pipeline it, and create the harnesses around these agentic framework to be able to implement it. So there's definitely a demand out there, no doubt about that. The how part of it comes down to, finding, working your relationships to find the right companies to go work with them. Maybe Ken, you may have some ideas that since you're over here, and or creating something, a solution, a vertical solution to a sharp problem using these agentic technologies, and then being able to take to market. But you may have some points of view from a Ugandan perspective too.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think the first thing is we need to educate. I mean, we really need to get some of the people that don't know anything about it up to speed. But I think it's just going in and learning the businesses. What is it that they're doing? Spend some time in the businesses, spend some time on what can you as a technology person can go into a business that's non-technology, see what they're doing. Where can you find places? So a lot of it is research. So I think sitting in your innovation and just trying to come up with ideas is not going to be great. It's the research that you're going to have to go out there and visit with these customers, visit with the things, visit with non-technical people, see how we can implement some of the things. Yeah. So you got to be out there. You got to be out there. We had a question up here. Oh, by the way, if somebody has a Spatio UAX353G, you left your lights on. So just giving you a heads up. Okay. We have a question right here, right up here. iPad, right here.
All right, thank you. So my name is Ndashimi Zephyr, and I'm a co-founder of Goheza. At Goheza, we connect businesses to content creators who are paid on performance. So my question is, at a policy level, I think you guys are doing great. I think the government is doing a really awesome job bringing experts like yourself and many others, and that's really great. But on the flip side, the private sector side, I interact with a lot of businesses, large and SMEs, but I find that they're not really using AI. When you ask them and they say they're using AI, under the hood is just ChatGPT to write their emails, right? So my question, I guess, is what tools do you think we can use as businesses to get some of this 27 to 32% that you're talking about that businesses are getting when they implement AI? And also on the other side, the people are not like the software engineers. She mentioned they had around, I forget the number, I think 8 software engineers, but then when they found out some AI that can maybe replace them, they fired them. So how do you incentivize these people who risk their jobs not to tell the boss, maybe like Lovable for design and things like that?
Yeah.
Then, sorry, the other question, the last one is, what are some of the skills that you think will not be replaced by AI? What are some of these skills that may not be easily replaced by AI, or not replaced by AI, but need a human behind them? Thank you.
Okay, let me see if I can remember all three. Let me start with the first one. I think in terms of companies, most companies, Ugandan companies are not alone in private sector. Most companies globally are struggling with realizing the 27 to 32% I mentioned, because it requires them to have clarity of which use cases they're going to go after. And number two, make sure that the data is clean. And number three, put the governance in place to execute that. And the sufficient or the necessary condition for all of those is that the CEO and the top has to be bought into the usefulness of AI and being able to apply. So that commitment needs to be in place. It does require, it requires education for CEOs and boards of companies for them to fully realize that. Again, it's not a Ugandan specific problem. It's a broader problem. And I think this is maybe one of the roles where industry associations and others can play, because you need to educate the boards and the CEOs about the usefulness, and then and only then it creates the right environment for entrepreneurs like you to go in and solve that particular problem for them. Your second question was on?
The second question was about what tools do you think that are being undervalued or underused by businesses that can help give them this 27 to 32%?
Yeah, the tools, it really comes, the tools, there's no one size fits all. But what's really driving a lot of that is a particular use case. And what I tell companies when I travel is, if you haven't really figured out what the use cases are, I know for sure there's tons of value in software development, content generation and management, customer service, and any kind of other sales and other types of tools, frontline facing tools. Those are the four. There's clear demonstrable value that you should just go and do, even if you're not sure if those are the priority ones, because you'll get the ROI in that regard. The third one, in terms of jobs, I think this is where what I'm beginning to find out is these tools, some of these tools are progressing to the point where they can do some entry-level jobs, but not jobs which are more, which require some more judgment and skills along the way. You need to do a good job of training students so that they come out with greater experience from a public or private sector perspective, so they're employable. That's number one. And number two, I think, as with this software coding example that you mentioned, I think you mentioned instead of 10, they went down to 4 or 5, something like that. I think what I'm beginning to find out is that is happening globally. But those 4 or 5 who are no longer part of that company are going either to other companies, like Ken mentioned, because they're trained in these tools and then they go elsewhere, or they're becoming entrepreneurs in their own right, because they have the technical skills, they understand from a business perspective what problem needs to be solved, and the barrier to entry to becoming an entrepreneur entrepreneurship has gone down. There was an interesting article I read this morning, which talked about 2 points of view. One, that there will be fewer jobs, exactly describing this dynamic that you described. And the second, there will be far more jobs. Both of them are true in my case, because some of these established companies will end up losing or cutting their headcount, but because there's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur, I'll see a dramatic rise in terms of entrepreneurs coming about. Both will happen at the same time globally.
All right, thank you.
We have one more question, and then Grace, can we go ahead? Yeah, we're just running out of time now at this point, sorry.
All right, thank you, Vivek. It's stimulating discussions and the conversations are so amazing. 2, 3 things. One, you talked about content creation as one of those things. I'm looking at the creative industry. Where do you see the case of AI? How is it going to affect the creative in the films, music, and all that? Because that's also a big area where a lot of young people are going into. How does that happen? It's going to affect it. Then when it comes to the education, is there a need for the pedagogy to completely change, say for a national pedagogy to change, to make us ready, to make any country ready for the technology? And lastly, if you were supposed to advise the government of Uganda to be able to leverage the advance of would be the 1, 2, 3 things that they should focus on. Thank you.
Okay. On the creative side, these tools are becoming extremely good in terms of executing a vision, a creative vision that somebody has. We're beginning to see in music, for example, in Spotify, the streaming platform, there are songs being created entirely with AI that are showing up now in the charts, in the top 100 in many cases. We're beginning to see tools now come about which provide much better coherence in terms of a plot over longer durations. Previously, they were limited to a few seconds and tens of seconds, but now they have become longer, so we are beginning to see that coherence emerge too. But so far, what we have not, these remain tools. So if the fundamental creativity that somebody has in terms of an idea of a plot or a musical composition, the same principle that I mentioned about entrepreneurship also applies over there. If you can conceive it and imagine and reimagine something, these tools allow you to execute that vision at a much lower price point than you could do before. So I am very optimistic about the creative side. Now, leaving aside the intellectual property side of it, because that's another Pandora's box, so I'm not going to touch that one or open that one. But that's number one. Number two, I think, number three I remember was on what are the 2 or 3 things that Uganda should focus on. In my view, of all the things when I zoom out, the 3 most important ones that emerge in my mind. The first one is providing access to the right compute infrastructure. Without the right compute infrastructure, AI just remains an aspiration. And that compute infrastructure doesn't need to take a data center which costs tens of billions of dollars. These small distributed data centers, PCs, phones, everything is a part of that. And then really thinking about, are the right incentives in place, for example, to put these devices in the hands of everyone, which obviously has a bearing on, is the tax regime right on these phones, for example, or not? That requires balancing of the government budget. But number one, compute infrastructure. Number 2, AI skilling and upskilling the workforce across all levels, especially the younger population, and giving them a sandbox to play around and test these things, because the more they play around, the more it gives them the ability to imagine and reimagine. And number 3 will be to provide a harmonized regulatory framework which is biased towards innovation. And by harmonized, I mean at the local, national, international level, so it's all harmonized. So small and medium companies particularly don't have the resources to try to battle it at all levels. So those are the top 3 priorities. I think, Grace, your second question was on education, in terms of what do we need to think about from an education perspective. I think education, it kind of touches on the skilling point I mentioned. My view would be Uganda does need a national AI skilling strategy. The first point of which, at least my recommendation would be just the basics. To one of the questions that Ken asked earlier, everybody thinks they're doing AI, but it's not really AI, or one of the audience members asked the same question. That is because not everybody has the same common understanding of AI. So things like, we all learn ABCs, we all learn 1, 2, 3s, but we don't currently make sure that everybody learns what a large language model is, what a small language model is, what is AI, what is generative AI, what is agentic AI, what is a token when it comes to these types of workloads. We don't learn the same language. And one of the discussions actually this morning when I was at a breakfast, one of the suggestions I had was even putting in place simple 4 15-minute modules, which my last employer, Dell, did to make sure everybody's talking the same language. It is not a heavy lift. 4 simple 15-minute modules that everybody can nationally take. So everybody's talking about the same language, and then we can build on that. And then beyond that, of course, comes down to thinking about how to use these AI tools in primary school education and colleges and beyond. That's a critical, important element. And that's one of the 3 things I mentioned should be the government priorities.
As much as I'd love to continue this conversation for the whole day, I think we could do this the whole day. I know that Vivek has some other appointments that he has to get to, so we have a limited amount of time. This presentation was done on YouTube. It's on the Simplifi YouTube channel. We can get that information out to you so you can go back or share it with some other people. But before we close, do you have, what are you parting comments to this audience and to Uganda about what do we need to do?
It's been a very interesting and instructive 8 days for me. Just like I've heard everywhere else when I have traveled, every country feels they're behind. Uganda is not behind. This is not a finite 100-meter dash. This is an infinite game. You have to play the long game. I am extremely encouraged by all the questions that I got asked in my various meetings, not only here, but also by the government policy officials. I came away very positively impressed with the intention behind those and the clarity and purpose with which those are moving. And I'm also encouraged by how, notwithstanding your comment about the private sector, how, at least this instance, I have already seen collaboration between public, private, and academic sector emerge, and the government clearly have an intention behind that to codify it and take it forward. So I am leaving very bullish from Uganda, and particularly I go back to the strengths that Uganda has. The demographics is a huge strength. Energy I talked about, I have learned that Uganda has 100 to 200 megawatts excess energy available. That is a huge strength. And then the intention by the government and the policy to set a national AI strategy which is coherent and can be executed across the board, that is a huge plus. So I think Uganda is in a really terrific shape, and notwithstanding how it may feel, I feel everybody should feel really optimistic about where the country is headed. I certainly am. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to have this discussion, and thank you for at least capturing the essence of my takeaways from my discussions this week.
No, it's been great. It's been great having you here. It's been great hearing some of the thoughts and some of the ideas that are going on. And Uganda's in a great position. I mean, that's the wonderful news coming out of this.
Yeah.
So with this, I'd like to thank all the people that helped put this together. Obviously, Dr. Vivek, the State Department, the U.S. Embassy, Lana and her team, thank you. Kevin, Ambassador Pop, obviously. ICT Association for Uganda, thank you very much. The Simplifi team, thank you for helping out. Plugged in, our team for PR. So thank you everybody who participated. So really thank you, and I'm very glad that we could put this together.
Thank you very much, Ken.
I hope it was
Thanks,
valuable.
everyone. Thank you.
Before you leave, so
Oh, thank you very much. Yes.
we've given him. You can show the. So he's got he needs to come back and do.
I have not seen this so far. Yes, you know that.
Right, and he's seen the giraffes. So
I have seen the giraffes, and thanks to Chantel, who's sitting over here, she organized the trip for me. And if anybody's planning a trip, I would highly recommend you reach out to Chantel. She did a terrific job. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.